If you're struggling to write your dissertation because you keep putting it off, then this is the video for you. I'm going to change the way you look at your dissertation, and I'm going to give you a proven action plan that you can follow to make sure you get started right away and do the best job you possibly can. Watch this video to learn more. If you're watching this video, then it's probably because you have a dissertation that you need to do, but you just keep putting it off. You keep coming up with reasons as to why now is not the right time to start. Maybe it's not the right environment, maybe it's too noisy, or you need some kind of book or some source. And you keep saying, I'll just do it next week, or I'll just do it in 2 weeks. Just keep putting it off. Well, if this is you, then let me give some insight into your future. What's going to happen is that for the next 2 or 3 months, you're just going to feel horrible because you know you should be doing this thing and you keep putting it off. And then eventually you'll have to start doing it anyway because your deadline will be 3 or 4 days away, and then you'll realize you're pretty fucked unless you really start getting on with it. At this point, it's going to be really horrible because you're right before the deadline. You'll have to stay up for days on end drinking copious amounts of coffee just to stay awake, and you're never going to produce your best work. Clearly, a better solution is to get started right away and just keep working on your dissertation until the deadline. Your dissertation will be much better and you won't have to go through all this stress. So what's happening here? Why do you keep procrastinating on this dissertation even though you know you should be doing it? Well, what's happening is this is the biggest thing you've ever been asked to do. Being asked to write 50, 60 pages and thousands of words to you seems like a massive, overwhelming task. It's like climbing a huge mountain. You feel like you're never going to finish it. You're never going to reach the peak. And your answer to this is to just keep putting it off and procrastinating on it. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that you can apply to make sure you get started on your dissertation right now and do the best job you possibly can. So there are 4 things that I want to talk to you about today, and I'm going to go through them right now. So the first thing you need to do is to change the way you think about your dissertation. Right now, when you think about your dissertation, you're just thinking of this huge piece of work that you have to do and just can't see yourself ever completing it. And that's a problem because that's why you're procrastinating. So instead of focusing on the end result, focus on the action. Focus on the action of writing your dissertation. So what do I mean by this? Well, you need to realize that huge things can be achieved by taking small actions one step at a time. And in terms of a dissertation, this might mean that you commit yourself to doing 1 hour of writing every single day. You don't worry about what you produce in that hour. You don't worry about the work that you do. You don't worry about the end result or the deadline for your dissertation. You just trust in the fact that if you sit down for 1 hour per day, every day for the next 2 months, then you're going to nail your dissertation. So why does this work so well and why is this so important? Well, if we think about producing a huge pile of work, that's very overwhelming for us and that intimidates us. But all of us can commit to doing 1 hour of work per day. That's not very intimidating at all. In fact, most of you can do that without any problems whatsoever. So that's point 1. Find a schedule and think about your schedule rather than producing this massive thing that scares you. The second thing you need to do is make it a habit. Habits are extremely powerful. If you want to make a big result, then what you need to do is make a habit out of it and work on it every single day. That's the key to making big results happen. See, the thing about habits is that they're really hard to instill in the first place. It takes a lot of willpower. But once you've instilled a habit, it then becomes pretty much automatic. So what I'm saying here is if you're going to rely on willpower alone to write your dissertation, then the chances are you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you create a habit of writing your dissertation on a daily basis, sticking to the schedule that we've just spoken about, then you'll find it much easier. So it turns out that the best way to instill a habit in your life is to have a trigger for the work that you're doing and a reward. It's actually called the 3 R's. The 3 R's stand for reminder, routine, and reward. So the routine in this situation is you writing your dissertation. But what you need to do is you need to think about something you do on a daily basis. So maybe you take a shower, maybe you have a coffee, and you need to find a trigger for writing your dissertation. So if you drink coffee on a daily basis, you need to say, okay, now, every time I make a coffee, I'm going to sit down at my desk and I'm going to start my dissertation. You see, habits are instilled with a trigger like that. And then once you've done your 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours of work, you then follow that up with a reward. So the reward might be a food that you like, might be you doing some exercise if you enjoy that, might be watching a film, playing a computer game, doesn't really matter. But what you need to do is you need to sandwich this routine of writing your dissertation with a trigger and a reward, and that will help the habit stick. Before long, you'll wake up, you'll have your coffee, you'll sit down and write your dissertation, and it'll become pretty much automatic for you. You won't have to keep relying on willpower, which is a finite resource and sometimes just lets you down. There's another psychological trick that you can employ to make sure that you really encourage building this momentum and consistency with your dissertation writing, and that's called the Paperclip Strategy. What you should do is go out right now and buy a big box of paper clips, and then in front of you have 2 glasses. You have one full of paper clips and then the other one would be empty. And each time you sit down and you do an hour's worth of work on your dissertation, you move one paper clip from the full glass into the empty glass. As time goes on, you're going to be proud because you're building up paper clips in your empty glass, but it's a very visual and focused way that you can really concentrate on the action of writing rather than the result. You can see the hours that you're putting in by the paper clips that are in your empty glass, and that's just going to build up over time. Third point is beating resistance. Some days you're going to have bad days and you're going to really not want to sit down and write your dissertation. You'll be stuck in your head and there'll be all sorts of reasons as to why you just don't want to do it. It'll be the last thing you want to do at that particular period of time. This is called resistance. You need to expect it and you need to have a plan to beat it. So the key to beating resistance is this. You can't think your way into good action, but you can action your way into good thinking. In other words, you can't just rationalize and intellectualize why you must sit down and get started. That just really doesn't work. Instead, what you need to do is simply just go through the motions of getting started and start as small as possible. So if your task on a daily basis is to write 1 hour of your dissertation, just sit down at your desk and open up Word. Open up your Word document and commit to writing, I don't know, let's say a sentence. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Just go through the motions of starting. Even though you have this tremendous resistance, just say, I'll do the smallest thing I possibly can, and at least you're doing something. What tends to happen is that once you sit down and once you start doing what you need to do, then the resistance starts to slowly dissipate. And before long, you'll realize that actually you start getting in the mood for writing your dissertation, start getting in the zone, and then you'll do the full hour. But even if you don't, you've still done a little bit of your dissertation. You've still sat down and reinforced that habit. So in summary, if you really don't want to do it, then just tell yourself, okay, listen, I'll just sit down and do 2 minutes of it or 5 minutes of it, or sit down and just read my notes. And before long, you'll start to feel that resistance dissipating. The fourth point is about bouncing back from failure. Listen, sometimes life gets in the way and you can't do the work that you want to do on a daily basis. You can't stick to your schedule. So again, you need to expect this and have a plan to bounce back from these failures. The point is this, small hiccups won't make you a failure, they just make you human. But the key is that you get back on track as soon as possible. So the first point is when you realize that you can't do your daily commitment, when you realize you can't stick to your schedule, try and make the failure as small as possible. So even though you might not be able to do a whole hour of writing or 2 hours of writing, whatever your schedule dictates, sit down and do 1 sentence. At least you've got something done, right? Just sit down and start thinking about it for 5-10 minutes. Just get going and do something. You've still done something towards your dissertation, even if you haven't completed the schedule that you wanted to do. The second point to keep you from derailing away from your schedule is to commit to something with somebody else. You see, an example of this is, let's say you want to go to the gym on a daily basis. Well, skipping the gym if you just go on your own is no big deal, right? You just go tomorrow. But if you know you're letting somebody down, if you know that you're supposed to be meeting your friend at the gym, then all of a sudden the pain of missing the gym becomes a little bit bigger. So let's say you commit to 1 hour per day or 2 hours per day of writing your dissertation. Do this with somebody else and hold yourselves accountable to each other. If you miss an hour writing of your dissertation like this, not only do you feel guilty to yourself because you've missed your schedule, but also you'll have your friend kicking your ass too. The third point is to design your environment to your success. In other words, you need to make it as easy as possible to write your dissertation and as hard as possible to not write your dissertation. Continuing the gym example, if you want to make sure you go to the gym tomorrow, you need to put your trainers, you need to put your running kit out right beside your bed so that the next morning it's right there. So it's easy as possible for you to get into your running kit and then go to the gym. The same is true for your dissertation writing. You should have a very clear working space, working environment with your laptop or your computer set up, and on your computer you should have all notifications turned off, and your Word document or whatever software processing tool you're using should be open and it should be ready to go. Next to you should have a bottle of water. You should have everything just streamlined, so all you need to do is sit down and just get going. If you have to go through a bunch of hoops just to get into the right environment, start writing your dissertation, then that immediately makes it a bit harder for you to get your dissertation writing done. Okay, so those are my 4 main points that you need to employ if you want to get your dissertation done. Firstly, you need to change the way you look at your dissertation. Stop looking at it as this huge pile of work that you have to do and instead focus on a schedule. Just commit yourself to doing 1, 2, or 3 hours work per day and focus on that. Trust in the fact that if you nail that, then the result will take care of itself. The best way to do this is to build what's called a habit. Make it a habit of writing your dissertation. You can build your habit by following the 3 R's: reminder, routine, and reward. In other words, you have something that you do on a daily basis, like let's say you make a coffee, use that as your trigger to write your dissertation. So you make your coffee, you write your dissertation, and then you have a reward at the end of it. On top of this, use what's called the Paperclip Strategy. Have a glass of paper clips and an empty glass, and each time you do an hour on your dissertation, move 1 paper clip from the full glass to the empty glass. The next thing is that you're going to face resistance. Some days you will just have a bad day and you really won't want to do your dissertation. To combat this, you just need to go through the motions and commit yourself to doing the smallest thing possible. Once you do that for 5-10 minutes, you'll feel that resistance dissipating. The final thing is this: some days you won't be able to stick to your schedule because, well, life just gets in the way, right? And you're only human. So here are the 3 things you need to do when this happens. Firstly, just try and do something, even if it's something very, very small. Just write a sentence or do some reading of your notes. You're still doing some work on your dissertation. The second thing is that you should get an accountability partner so that the pain of not following through on your schedule is even greater. And finally, design your environment for your success. Make it as easy as possible to write your dissertation and as hard as possible not to. So these are my top tips for you to really get started on your dissertation and do as good a job as possible for your degree. To be honest, if I take this 1 step further, these are my key tips for taking on anything of any size. So for instance, with this video project right now, I'm following this. I'm not thinking about making 300 videos. I'm thinking about making 1 video once per week. And I'm going to commit to that schedule until I get to the 300 videos. That's the key point that you need to take away for anything big that you want to achieve in your life. Commit to the schedule and not the end goal. I really hope you found something useful out of this video. If you did, leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. I produce videos like this once per week, and I'll see you again next week.